It's crucial to get your cell referencing correct when you're writing formulas in Excel. If you're a beginner, you may not be familiar with formulas. You may have seen other people's where they're dollar signs and it looks quite complicated. When writing a formula, we reference certain cells. I'm just going to go ahead and write a formula and then explain as I go. So I've got some products here. These are their prices and the quantities sold. I want to know the total for each line. That's my price and quantity multiplied together. The formula is equals price multiplied by quantity. Enter. And that's the correct result. If I just click on here, it highlights the cells. B5, that's the cell address for the first one. That's the price, column B, row 5. And C5 is the quantity, column C, row 5. If you didn't know, the multiplier, that asterisk, is on your number 8 key. So you press Shift 8 and that gives you your multiplier there, your asterisk. For this whole example, we don't actually need to worry about dollar signs. This formula is perfect for this example. Let me just press enter. So obviously I want to know the total for all of these as well. I don't need to write the formula again and again and again. I just drag this formula down. As I say, in this scenario, it works just to drag this down all these rows. Sometimes we have multiple columns and we might also want to drag the formula across. So once I've just shown you this basic example, I'll go through some scenarios where you do need to add dollar signs and the errors that you might get if you don't. So let's drag this down. And whenever I write a formula, you would just do a few spot checks, but I can see that they're correct. And let's just see what happens with this formula. So if I just click in here and then in my formula bar, this was my first one. And this is correct. I can see the cells that it's referencing, price, quantity in row 5. That's correct. When I move down to the next row, it's multiplying these two, and then these, and then these. And that's correct. Every time I move down a row, my price and quantity also move down a row. So you can see here B5, C5, then when I move down here, if you keep looking up here, 6, 7, 8. And obviously that's correct. When my formula is in here, I don't want to just still keep referencing these cells up here. We're just looking at it line by line. So I'll go through another couple of examples and you can see the difference. If you're still unsure, in my other formula videos, as I'm constructing the formula, I do mention the cell referencing and what I'm doing with that. And in particular, on my XLOOKUP and index and match video, I go through it in quite a lot of detail. So you may want to look at that video just to see how you apply it in the real world. You can use these examples and write formulas and drag them down and across and add dollar signs to different places and see what happens in each scenario. That should help you get your head around it. Before I move on, I just need to point out where the dollar sign is. So on your keyboard, it's on the number 4 key. So you press Shift 4 and that gives you your dollar sign. I also have it, and if you write a lot of formulas, you might want to add it to the quick access toolbar up here. I have another video on the quick access toolbar. That's one of the basics. Or another way is to toggle through your F4 key. I use F4 on my keyboard. If you're using it on a laptop, you might need to hold the function key at the same time as pressing F4. So if we just use this here, this C5 cell, if I want to toggle through adding dollar signs, I'm just going to press my F4 once. This is absolute referencing where I've added a dollar sign to the column and to the row. So I've locked that cell. If I just press it again, my F4 key, now it's only fixing the row. And it's just a dollar sign in front of the row. And again, now it's just a dollar sign in front of the column. And now there are no dollar signs. So I use F4 quite a lot and just toggle through them to add my cell referencing. I'm just going to press escape. I should also point out, if you use conditional formatting and you use the formula, new rule, and the formula option, when you pick cells here, it does automatically absolute reference those cells. Usually that's incorrect, so you have to amend it. Usually you probably wouldn't want the column 1 there, but I'll go through that in another video when I go through conditional formatting because there's quite a lot to go through on that. I just want to concentrate on the cell referencing here. So let's move on to the other examples. I had the same products and prices. What I want to work out is what these prices would be if I use my £5 voucher. We're doing a promotion and we're deducting £5 from these products. I'm just going to start writing a formula similar to before. So equals price minus this £5. So when you look at that, that all looks fine. It should give me the correct result. And it does. 51 minus 5. And if I click up here, we can see the cells it referenced, and that's correct. And as before, I'm going to drag this formula down. I shouldn't need to do anything with B6 because as before, I want to move down a row each time my answer corresponds to the price. Let's just go ahead and press enter. So I'm getting errors. Let's just click up here. So that's correct. B6, C4. You can see that my voucher, my £5, is always in C4. Whichever row we're on here, we still always want to be referencing that £5. If I move down here, the first part is correct. It's looking at the correct price, but it's not in C4 anymore. It's not on that £5. It's moved down, and that's why we get an error, because this is the header, deduct voucher. That's text, so Excel can't do that calculation, and we get an error. Here we get a value, and this can be deceiving, because when you actually return a value, you might not notice you've made an error. Luckily, we didn't notice because these errors came up. Let's just look up here, and it's this cell minus this. It's deducting that value we already calculated for this here. So because they are actually valid values, you are going to get a result, but just not the correct one. And here we get an error because it's 53 minus this error here. So hopefully now you can see why I might want to lock cells, and this is where we need our dollar signs. The last part of our formula should always be C4. So at the moment, when we scroll down here, and if you just look in the formula bar, that's moving down each time. 5, 6, 7. We don't want that. It should always be C4. We need to lock that. The price part was correct. We do still always want to move down here, but we need to fix the last part of our formula. Even though this one's correct, I always want to correct my formula in the first cell. I don't want to have a formula here, then just to make the amendment to this one here and these ones. I want to have it correct in the first cell, then drag it down to complete all the other cells. So I'm going to highlight this C4 and press my F4 key. And you can see now, either down here or in my formula bar, it's now got a dollar sign in front of the column and a dollar sign in front of the row. The price is as it was, no dollar signs needed. We do want that to move down. Enter, and then drag that down. These are now correct. If I click on one of these, the price is moved down to the correct row, and this is still in C4. So this is now correct. This is why you need your dollar signs. Hopefully you've understood that, but I am going to complicate that slightly, and then hopefully when we move on to the next example, I'll clarify that again. Our voucher is always in C4. That's why we've absolute reference and put a dollar sign in front of the column and the row. We didn't actually need the dollar sign in front of the column. It doesn't matter either way, you're going to get the same result. So let me just remove it and drag it down. You'll see that the figures don't change. Because we're only working in one column, column C, we're only dragging the formula down the rows. So we only really need to lock the row. If we were dragging this formula over here, you will then need to take into account the columns. But for this example, we're in one column, dragging it down the rows. So really, we just didn't want that part of the formula moving down each time. So it was really only the 4 that needed to be locked. It's up to you how you work that. I'd be more inclined to do it the way I did it, first of all, with the dollar sign in front of both. So if I just toggle through my F4 like that, either way works. The column isn't so important in this scenario. I've probably confused you, so let me show you an example where I have 2 columns. So I've got the same products and prices. We've got the £5 promotion here. We've also got a different promotion where it's £8 off. That's a staff voucher. For now, we're just going to write a formula in here. So if it gets confusing, just focus on what you're working on, then we can adjust it afterwards. So equals price minus the voucher. That's going to give us the correct result. Enter. But it isn't going to work when we drag it down as we saw before, because we definitely need to lock this cell. As to where we apply the dollar signs, we'll see afterwards. For now, let's just absolute reference that by pressing our F4 key. So we've got the $ in front of the K and row 4. So we're in column K at the moment. That £5 is always in cell K4. Enter. Drag down. They're the same results as we had over there. They're correct. So for this column, this formula does work, but we do want to drag it over. We're going to hit some errors. I don't know if you can spot any of them by looking at the formula up here. Let's try it. So one issue is that we don't actually get any errors. And we can kind of see that these are less than those. We might not realise we've made a mistake. But if we look closer, that's £10 difference. It should only be £8. These are all £10 less. This is why we always need to do spot checks. It might not return an error. It still might return a value, but the incorrect value. Let's see where we went wrong. So if I click up here, the first one, and I don't know if you foresaw that, because over here we didn't need to do anything with our price. Our price was always in column B. The formula here is the price is in column J. We did need to lock it, just the column number. As before, every time the formula moves down the row, we want the formula to look up the price on the corresponding row. But we did need to lock J because our price is always in column J. And when we drag our formula over, we didn't want that to move over to column K. And that's what's happened here. It's now picking up this figure. So it's doing 46 minus 5 rather than 51 minus 5. And actually the 5 is wrong, but we'll correct that in a second. So you can see here that what we needed to do in the original formula is to lock this column. So I put a $ in front of my J so that price isn't moving. However many columns we drag this formula over, it's still always referring to this price in this column here. And the row we don't need to do anything with because we do want it to move down every time. So that's the first part. If we just go over here and look again. The second part is that it's looking up this £5 voucher. These values here should be deducting the £8. Over here, it didn't matter if we locked the column or not, both worked. Over here, it does matter because we have 2 columns. The voucher value is always on row 4, so we need to definitely lock the 4 and put the $ in front of the 4. Over here, column K is correct, but when we drag the formula over, we would want that to be L4, but we've locked it. We've put a $ in front of the K. So let's correct this in the original formula in this cell here. So we wanted to lock the price in column J, but not the row. We want to move down and it reference each of these prices. And we don't want to lock column K. We want that to move to L4 when we drag the formula over. Let's drag this down and then see what happens. That's correct. 51 minus 8 is 43. You can see these are correct now. If I click in one of these, then up there, we're referencing the price and then that voucher there in that column. So it's on the correct row and correct column. Correct row, correct column. Correct row, correct column. Hopefully that makes sense, and I urge you to play around with this and keep changing where you're putting the $ and see how it changes your result, and then put your cursor in that formula and then see why you're getting that result. As I mentioned, I've got lots of formula videos, so I'll go through it briefly when I'm writing those formulas, but particularly look at my XLOOKUP and index and match one, where I explain it in detail, and you can see how you can apply this in the real world.